It always happens when you least expect it. Just when you've started to move on. Just when the pain is beginning to fade. There they are, a text, a call, maybe even an apology. The same person who once left you broken, confused, and doubting your own worth suddenly wants back in. And you ask yourself why. Why do men come back after hurting you? Is it guilt? Is it love? Or is it something else entirely? The truth is, their return has nothing to do with you and everything to do with them. Human psychology is predictable. People are wired to crave what they once had, especially when they see it slipping away. And if you don't understand this, you might find yourself trapped in a cycle, welcoming them back, hoping things will be different this time. Only to end up exactly where you started. But today, we're breaking that cycle. Today, we're going to unravel the real reasons men come back after hurting you. And more importantly, we're going to talk about how you can take your power back so that their return no longer has control over you. People don't value what they can easily have. That's a fundamental truth woven into human psychology, into the very fabric of how we perceive worth. When something is abundant, we take it for granted. When it becomes scarce, we suddenly see its value. This applies to everything. Money, time, opportunities, but most painfully, to relationships. When a man walks away from you, he assumes a position of control. He believes he has options, that he can leave and come back on his own terms. And the reason he feels this way is simple, because in his mind, you will be there. You will wait. You will hurt. You will miss him. And if he ever chooses to return, you will still want him. That expectation alone gives him power, and power, once given, is rarely returned voluntarily. But something happens when he realizes that his absence has not created a void in your life. When he looks back and sees that you are not longing for him, not mourning him, not waiting for his return, something inside him shifts. It's a deep, instinctive reaction because it challenges the very foundation of his ego. He starts questioning himself. Was I not as important as I thought? Did I miscalculate? Because in his mind, his presence in your life was a certainty, until it wasn't. Men are wired to pursue, to conquer, to prove their worth through validation. And the most unsettling thing for a man who once had control over your emotions is to realize that he no longer does. When he left, he expected your world to shrink. He expected your focus to remain on him, even in his absence. But when he sees you thriving, when he notices that your life has expanded instead of contracted, his entire perception of the situation is disrupted. People chase what eludes them. It's a fundamental aspect of human nature. When something is out of reach, it triggers desire. The moment you stop trying to prove your worth, stop seeking his attention, stop positioning yourself as an option, you become a challenge. And nothing is more intoxicating than the pursuit of something that once seemed guaranteed but is now slipping away. This isn't manipulation. This isn't a game. This is about reclaiming your self-worth and understanding a deeper psychological truth. You train people how to treat you. If you allow someone to leave and return as they please, you're teaching them that your presence is not a privilege, it's a given. And what is given freely is rarely valued. But when you create distance, when you remove your emotional energy from someone who took it for granted, you force them into a place of self-reflection. They are no longer reassured of their importance in your life. They are forced to wonder, to second-guess, to question whether they made the right decision. And uncertainty, more than anything, breeds regret. The moment you become scarce, not pretending to be, but truly detaching, is the moment they feel the weight of what they lost. It's no longer about whether they miss you, it's about whether they can accept the painful truth that maybe, just maybe, they underestimated you. That realization alone is enough to bring a man back, not because he suddenly understands your worth, but because he can no longer bear the thought that someone else might. Scarcity is power, and power, when wielded correctly, does not need to chase, it attracts. Men come back not because they suddenly realize your worth, but because they want to prove that they can still have you. It's not about love. It's not about regret. It's about ego. And if you don't understand that, you'll mistake their return for something deeper than it actually is. When a man leaves a relationship, he does so with a certain confidence. He believes that he is in control, that he has the final say. That if he ever changes his mind, he can simply walk back into your life and pick up where he left off. Why does he believe that? Because most people don't truly move on. They wait. They hope. They keep a door open, even if it's just a small crack, believing that one day, the person who left will return, apologize, and finally see their worth. But here's what's actually happening: when a man leaves and sees that you're still emotionally affected, still lingering in the past, still responding to his presence, it assures him. It confirms that he mattered, that he had an impact, and that knowledge feeds his ego, whether he admits it or not. It allows him to walk away with a sense of superiority, knowing that he could come back, that he could change his mind, and that you would still be there to welcome him. But something shifts the moment you stop reacting. The moment you stop seeking answers, the moment you stop waiting. When he reaches out and realizes that you are no longer emotionally invested, that you have built a life in which his presence is no longer central, something inside him breaks. And it's not love that drives him back. It's the loss of control. Men crave validation. They need to feel wanted. It's not a weakness, it's a deeply ingrained part of their psychology. And when they sense that your desire for them is gone, that you have detached in a way that is irreversible, it becomes an unbearable thought. Not because they necessarily want you back, but because they need to know they still could. And that's where the ego comes in. A man will come back just to see if he still has access to you, just to see if the door is still open, just to confirm that he still holds some kind of influence over your emotions. And when he does, he's not coming back to commit to change, to become a better version of himself. He's coming back to test you. And here's the mistake most people make: they interpret his return as a sign of genuine change. They believe that his regret is real, that he has finally seen the error of his ways, and so they let him back in, unaware that what he was really looking for was confirmation. Confirmation that he was still significant, that he still had an effect on you. And the moment he gets that confirmation, the cycle resets. He leaves again because what he was looking for was not you. It was reassurance. He needed to validate his own importance, to soothe his own ego, to make sure that he hadn't truly lost control. And once he knows that he hasn't, he no longer needs to stay. People don't always appreciate what they have while they have it. They assume it will always be there, that it's fixed, that it's a given. And only when they lose it, only when they see the contrast between what they had and what they ended up with, do they finally understand its value. That's human nature. And that's exactly why men often come back after walking away. When a man leaves, he's operating under an assumption that there is something better, something more exciting, something more fulfilling out there. Maybe he takes you for granted. Maybe he thinks you'll always be an option. Maybe he believes that love, connection, loyalty, these things can be easily replaced. And so he leaves, expecting that he will find what he's looking for somewhere else. But here's the problem: when he steps into that new reality, he realizes that it's not what he imagined. The excitement fades, the fantasy crumbles. He starts to see that the qualities he once overlooked in you were not as common as he assumed. Maybe he thought he could find someone else who understood him the way you did, who supported him, who challenged him, who made him feel seen. But what he finds instead is something shallow, something transactional, something that lacks the depth of what he walked away from. And then he begins to compare. That's when the contrast effect kicks in. He starts remembering the things he once dismissed. The warmth in your voice, the way you laughed at his dumb jokes, the way you challenged him to be better, to think deeper, to grow. And suddenly, what he once overlooked now feels like a loss too big to ignore. And it's not just about relationships. This is a psychological phenomenon that applies to everything. People don't appreciate light until they've lived in darkness. They don't understand warmth until they've felt the cold. And when a man experiences something lesser than what he once had, he starts to reevaluate his choices. He starts to wonder if he made a mistake. That's when he comes back. But here's what you need to understand: his regret is not necessarily about you. It's about his own realization. It's about him recognizing that his expectations were wrong, that his decisions led him to something unfulfilling. That he traded something valuable for something temporary, and now he wants to reverse that decision. But just because he regrets it doesn't mean he deserves another chance. Because where was that realization when you were standing right in front of him? Where was that clarity when you were giving him your time, your energy, your love? If it takes losing you for someone to finally appreciate you, then their appreciation was never real to begin with. It was reactive. It was conditional. It was based on comparison, not recognition. And here's the real danger: if you take him back too quickly, if you make it too easy, you remove the lesson entirely. He doesn't have to face the full weight of his mistake. He doesn't have to sit with the discomfort of knowing that actions have consequences. Instead, he gets to erase the contrast that made him miss you in the first place. And that's how the cycle repeats. So the real question isn't whether he will come back. The real question is, will you be in a place where his return even matters anymore? Because by the time he realizes what he lost, you might have already realized that he was never supposed to be in your life in the first place. The most powerful shift in any relationship dynamic happens when you no longer need them. Not when you pretend you don't. Not when you play games or manipulate the situation. But when, deep down, you have genuinely let go. Because people can sense it. They can feel when they are no longer at the center of your emotional world. And that realization shakes them to their core. When a man walks away, he assumes that some part of you will always be tethered to him. He believes that even if you seem strong on the outside, there will always be a part of you that still waits, that still wonders, that still hopes. And as long as he believes that, he holds a form of control. Because he knows that if he ever chooses to return, there will be a door left open. But when you detach, when you stop seeking answers, when you stop replaying the past and instead focus on building a life that is yours, that's when everything changes. That's when he senses a shift. And that shift is unsettling. Because suddenly, he is no longer the one in control. He is no longer the one being pursued, thought about, or longed for. And that realization creates a sense of loss, even if he was the one who walked away. This is where people misunderstand power in relationships. Power isn't about manipulation. It's not about making someone jealous or playing mind games. It's about genuine emotional independence. It's about getting to a place where their absence no longer affects your sense of self-worth. And when you reach that point, the entire dynamic flips. He starts to wonder what changed. He starts to question whether he made a mistake. He begins to feel a void. Not because he suddenly understands your worth, but because his influence over you is gone. And people do not like losing influence. They do not like feeling irrelevant in the lives of those who once cared deeply for them. This is why so many men come back, not because they've had some profound realization about love, but because they feel the distance.